This is Fantasy Sanctuary. Welcome in. It's AFC East we're talking tonight. Jets first up. Let's go. Where else are we going to start? We have to talk about the quarterback situation, Rich. Your Jets, just give us all guns.
Do we have to start here? Look, it's atrocious. Like this offense, this team was built to win. That they ticked every box except quarterback. You think, was it top 3 draft picks 2 out of the last 5 years, and we've yet to find a quarterback. Look, I personally, I'm all in on let's go and find a veteran in free agency, whether it's Derek Carr. I'm happy to go and spend a first to get Derek Carr. If it's Aaron Rodgers, let's go and send 2 firsts to go and get Aaron Rodgers. We just need a quarterback. This team is built to win now. There are very few holes across this roster. It's basically a quarterback or bust.
How much weight do you put into what the coaches are saying at the minute about how Zach Wilson is still a part of their plans? Do you think there's anything to that, or do you think they're just trying to preserve what tiny amount of trade value he still has is?
I think it's just purely trying to keep face. I don't think Zach Wilson's on-field performance was the thing that killed him. I think that if Zach Wilson comes out after that Patriots game and says, yes, I was the problem, I cost us the game, I need to do better for this team, I still think Zach Wilson was the starting quarterback in week 18. I think the problem was that because Zach Wilson came out and said he didn't do anything wrong, the locker room turned on him, and I think he was done. And I think that there is no world I can ever see that Zach Wilson steps in and starts for the New York Jets ever again, because he's completely lost the locker room, and I don't think that ever comes back. So I think they're basically trying to hold any potential trade value they can, and they've got to say the right things, haven't they?
Yeah, so just touching on that, we can see on screen you've got Mike White as a free agent this season. So obviously Mike White came in and did a good job. Do you think the Jets push to sign him, or would you prefer to see them kind of like aim higher, really? Because the last thing the Jets need now is the wrong solution. This has to be done right this time around.
I think that Joe Douglas and Robert Sala's jobs rely on them finding the right option. And look, Mike White, yes, he was playing with whatever it was, 7 broken ribs or whatever, but he showed in that Seahawks game that he is not a player that's going to carry this team to potential playoffs down the line. So I think Mike White is done as a starting quarterback in the NFL. I think he's a very good backup, but I think that they need to go out and get a big fish, and I think they're going to take an almighty swing, because at the end of the day, both their jobs are relying on it.
Okay, so we've got the bad stuff out of the way. Let's get on to the good stuff. And there is loads of good stuff with the Jets, probably the most I can remember in my time following the NFL. And I'm sure, you don't remember too many better sort of skill position groups for the Jets than this. But let's start with Breece Hall. RB8 in points per game between weeks 3 to 7 when he really started to break out. He was just on a tear. And then, of course, he gets injured. Do you feel confident that he's going to be able to make a full recovery in time for the season?
I think he's going to be recovered in time for the start of the season. I think the Jets would be smart if they don't give him the full workload immediately. I think, we've seen with Zonovan Knight that he's produced in the time he was out. Okay, Michael Carter's slightly disappointed this year, but there's other options that can potentially carry the load. And maybe we see Breece Hall eased back in at the beginning of the season. And then once we get to mid-season, once we get to those fantasy playoffs, he is back to being, in my eyes, the dynasty RB1 that we all hoped he would be halfway through this season.
Is he somebody that you would be okay trading for at this point? We know everyone's valuing those 23 draft picks really highly at the minute, but is he somebody that you could see yourself trading for as those draft picks kind of get overpriced?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd happily pay anything short of the 102 for him. For me, the only running back I would rather own than Breece Hall in all of Dynasty is Bijan Robinson. So yeah, he's still, if you were taking, I'd take him over any running back in the NFL right now.
Okay, and so moving on, staying with the good, we've got Garrett Wilson, who by your trade values is 2 first-round picks, which just seems completely right. He's had an incredible season. I know we're in a startup at the minute, and he went in the mid-second round, which seems completely appropriate. He's just an absolute stud of a player.
Yeah, the guy's incredible. I could talk all day about how amazing he is. He's an elite route runner. He is so much fun to watch, and he's kind of got that bit of dog inside him. You know, he wasn't happy when Zach Wilson was basically appalling, and he let people know that. I think there is more to come from Garrett Wilson. The underrated thing, only 74% of his targets were deemed catchable. That's a crazy number. Like, you know, if we're getting up to the 80, 90%, whether it's they bring in a veteran, you know, this guy could literally be, you know, a top 3 wide receiver next season. And I feel like that's hyperbole to say it, but we saw the flashes. When he had competent quarterback play, he was elite.
Okay, and staying in the wide receiver core, Elijah Moore obviously had a really bumpy season, but he worked his way back as the season went on. By like the end of the season, he was averaged 75% of the snaps over the last 4 or 5 games or so. How do you feel about his future going into the offseason? Do you worry that he could still want to trade, or do you think that the situation will work itself out when we get more competent quarterback play?
I think his value, his production, for me, is purely tied to Corey Davis. And the reason I say that is that Elijah Moore started the year as an outside receiver playing 100% of the snaps. Garrett Wilson came in and took over that job from him. They're not going to bench Corey Davis, who's our best blocking receiver by a long way. So Elijah Moore then had to move into the slot and became a part-time player, as you said, playing 70 to 80% of the snaps on any given week. Now, Corey Davis could potentially be cut at the end of the year with very little cap hit. If they do that, I believe that Elijah Moore can then become a full-time player. If he becomes a full-time player, I think we see that spike in fantasy production, dynasty value, and it makes him a good play. So, yeah, if Corey Davis gets cut, I'm going to go out and buy myself some Elijah Moore shares.
So in his current value is an early second. I would guess that in best ball drafts, he'd probably end up around round 6 to 7, depending on how things shake out. But you'd be happy paying an early second on rebuild teams where you need to take those shots?
Yeah, potentially. I think he's a boom bust option, certainly, isn't he? I think you saying that price in best ball, that feels quite expensive. I'm not sure I'd have the stomach to do that quite yet, if that's going to be where he's going, certainly.
Well, I'm definitely building in that, you get Aaron Rodgers or somebody who can, not annoy everyone in the locker room and keep the team together and produce consistently. But, if we end up getting a quarterback who dink and dunks to the slot a lot, I really believe that Elijah Moore's value is going to get back into that first round price. Outside of them, we touched on Corey Davis. The tight ends aren't great options at all, but I think it's just worth noting that Conklin was declared tight end 1 ahead of CJ Uzomah, who'd come off a big season in Cincinnati. Conklin out-targeted him. I think it was 83 to 27. So really, there's not an awful lot to say about them. But Rich, any feelings about the tight ends?
No, I think Conklin's won that job. I think he showed this year that he's a competent, league average tight end. I think it's not a problem that the Jets need to go out and address this offseason now. So yeah, I think if you're looking for, someone that's going to give you some production, then fine. But I think there's certainly sexier and potentially high ceiling names out there.